spent the night together at the campsite and that everything went off without a hitch. She did find it slightly odd that she hadn't heard from Maddy by that point, but it also wasn't alarming given that Maddy had a lot of things going on that weekend, and being that she was out camping, her mom was probably thinking, hey, maybe her phone battery died or something, but she's 20. She's a big girl. I'm sure I'll hear from her at some point today. As the day went on, though, she started to feel a little more apprehensive about the whole thing, so she decided to contact Jordy. She doesn't have her cell numbers, so she calls Jordy's parents' house. Jordy's mom gives Dawn Jordy's cell number and lets her know that she's at work. Dawn is a little put off by this, but she calls Jordy. That is when she finds out that Jordy did not spend the night at the campsite with Maddy, and now she's concerned. And from what I gathered, she spends the rest of the evening kind of just trying to contact her and get in touch, figure out what's going on. She's not in full-blown panic at this point. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, there's another party beginning to form. It was unclear if it was just like round 2 of the night before or a completely new party, but it does take place at Hogsback as well in the exact same location. This party, however, was much larger in size, with about 150 people in attendance, including Maddy's younger sister, Georgia. Georgia later states that she remembers seeing her sister's truck and tent there and wasn't too concerned about it, but she also wasn't aware of the previous night's events, and I believe she didn't know anybody was actually looking for her sister at that time. At some point during this party, a young man, who again, name has been withheld, decided, just for some unknown reason, to flatten Maddy's tent. He was at the party, saw nobody claiming it, and just decided to flatten it, I guess. This man was later detained and questioned by police as to why he did that. He was subsequently let go. I'm assuming police were happy enough with whatever reason he gave. But aside from that, there doesn't seem to be any sort of weirdness going on at this party, and the night continues on. By the next morning, Sunday, Dawn has officially decided that something isn't right. She and the family head on down to Hogsback to find out what Maddy is up to. When they get there, they find Maddy's truck still parked where it's been for the past 2 days now, along with her now flattened tent. Her truck is there, locked, everything's still intact. Nothing's missing from the bed of the truck, and there was actually things of value that could have easily been taken. Nothing, again, seems to be missing aside from Maddy's keys, phone, and, well, Maddy herself. Dawn calls the police on the spot. She explains the situation to the emergency personnel on the line, that their daughter went camping Friday night with a friend and hasn't been seen or heard from since. While police make their way to the campsite, Dawn notices campers in the surrounding area, so she goes and starts questioning them. Some are actually even acquaintances of Maddy. None of them have seen Maddy while being there, just her truck and tent. Once police arrive on the scene, they start scouting the area, taking a report, and just doing their job. They gather what info they can from Dawn and the family. Later on, though, after the police leave the scene, Jordy apparently arrives back at the campsite again, but this time with her mom. It sounds like it was under the premise of trying to help or find out more as to what was going on, but during this time, Jordy apparently finds Maddy's rings on the ground. Some stated that there was also, earrings, but for the most part, I gathered that they were rings, like jewelry from her fingers. Anyway, she proceeds to pick up the jewelry and takes them with her, eventually giving them to a mutual family friend of hers and Maddy's named Kathy, who then gives them to Dawn later that day. This just seemed really odd to me. First of all, why are you touching anything at this potential crime scene? Being that this is Canada and I'm not personally familiar with how they process missing persons cases or potential crime scenes, maybe I'm wrong here, but if a report has been put in and police have arrived at a scene where someone went missing from, isn't it roped off from the public with crime scene tape? Aren't there still police on site? Isn't everything being collected and processed as evidence? If this is so, how is Jordy just roaming around the area and subsequently walking off with evidence? And how was this evidence missed by police when they arrived and did their search? And being that Jordy was there the previous morning and was actually in the tent grabbing her stuff, how did she not see the rings then? It just all sounds super weird and doubtful, at least on Jordy's end. I've got some serious questions. I mean, there's really just one of two options here, right? Option A, the rings weren't there Saturday morning when Jordy and Tyler returned, hence why she didn't see them and take them then. That would mean that they were placed there sometime after Jordy and Tyler left, and the next day when they were discovered, ironically, by Jordy. If this is the case, that leaves us with a lot of suspects. Garrett, who arrived after them, all of the 150 people at the party that Saturday night, including Georgia, the sister, who I feel would have seen them if she was like, hey, why is my sister's tent and truck here? But she's not, which is 100% what I would be doing if it were my sister. Then, of course, there's option B, which involves Jordy either planting them there or having them the whole time and not actually finding them at the campsite. Both options seem completely plausible. The only thing I can pretty fucking confidently say is that Maddy didn't put the rings there herself. Interestingly enough, though, Dawn wasn't too concerned with the rings being found where they were. She said that Maddy was notorious for leaving her stuff around everywhere and had a tendency to be a little careless with her belongings. I mean, as are a lot of teens. I suffer from the same thing even now, but it's not intentional. It's kind of just like an old brain syndrome, I guess. I have zero short-term memory. But regardless, I feel like the rings shouldn't be discounted. I think they're a very telling piece of evidence. Obviously, Dawn knows her daughter better than anyone, and she's probably not wrong about Maddy's tendency to leave things around. But think about it. Think about Maddy's actions that night. She specifically didn't leave that party because she had all of her stuff set up and was ready for bed. She didn't want to take the time to take everything down and pack it up late at night, and she certainly wasn't going to be leaving it unattended at the site. She even expressed that to Jordy. I don't see her or anyone really taking their jewelry off while camping. You run such a high risk of losing it. You keep it on, you lock it in your car, or you just don't bring it at all. Ask any woman. It's just facts. Dawn also had some interesting details about Maddy's decision to stay that night. She said that Maddy was not the type of person to stay behind and camp alone. She wouldn't have been comfortable staying unless she knew someone was going to be staying with her or somebody was on their way. Dawn feels that Maddy chose to stay because someone she knew was either staying with her or was on their way over, which made me wonder back to Maddy's last incoming call from the unnamed family known guy. From what I read, the guy was, quote, put through the ringer and was cleared of any involvement. However, no other details were provided. There just seems to be a lot going on here that is just strange. But moving forward. So again, Sunday, Maddy is reported missing by her family, and searches begin starting at Hogsback Lake. Now, Hogsback Lake, at its deepest, is a little over 20 feet, and it's about 128 acres in size. Police and volunteers heavily searched every square inch of this lake multiple times and came up with nothing. They divided up into multiple search parties and scoured the area, initially spanning over 60 square kilometers, using helicopters, overhead equipment with infrared cameras, people on foot and on quads, because some of the areas of this campsite are heavily wooded and rough terrain to maneuver on foot. They searched the nearby bodies of water as well, which I believe some were, I'm going to butcher the names of these lakes, but we're going to try Sinkut Lake, Kluz Lake, and Eula Tazella Lake. Hopefully I got those right. And the surrounding terrain of these. And again, they just came up with nothing. This search has gone down in history as the most extensive missing person search the RCMP has performed. So while searching the nearby areas, police also focused on what they had to work with at the campsite as well. They had her tent, her truck, which was locked and seemingly had all of her things in it still intact. Nothing was stolen or missing, but they did not have Maddy's keys, nor did they have her cell phone. This told them that Maddy was most likely not the victim of a robbery because nothing of value was taken. Being that the tent was flattened, they had no way of knowing what state it was in before being flattened. All they had was the statements of witnesses both at the party the night of the disappearance and the following day. They noted that Jordy's belongings were missing and questioned her as to why she came back the next day to take them. They seized the sleeping bag and the pillow that was taken from the scene and sent them off for testing. Something interesting about this, Maddie's family was a very avid outdoorsy family, clearly being that Maddie was the one well prepared for camping with all the necessities and tents and all the gear. Being so, Dawn was one of those moms that would wash everything and clean it up after camping and store it properly, including sleeping bags. So Maddie's sleeping bag was fresh and clean for this camping trip. So she felt confident that when that was collected for evidence, anything foreign found on it would 100% be relevant to the case. This, however, was not the case for Jordy. Apparently, Jordy was not from an avid outdoorsy family who took good care of their camping gear and whatnot, because when her sleeping bag went out for testing, blood was found on it. I didn't find anything definitively stating that the blood was Jordy's or unknown or whatever. But when Jordy was asked about the blood, she stated that the blood was from a previous trip years ago that she took where she injured her heel or her foot or something, and she got blood on it. Gross that after that trip you never washed your sleeping bag, especially knowing you bled in it, and just rolled that puppy up and threw it back in the garage and left it there for years until you decided to camp with it again. But apparently this reason was enough to satisfy authorities, because the blood was essentially dropped as an issue, and as far as I could tell, there hasn't been anything more about it. Weirdly enough, though, Dawn says that at some point Jordy offered her the information that the day she went back for her stuff to collect things from that campsite, she came home and threw at least the pillow, I'm not sure about the sleeping bag, into the washer. Now, why would you do that is my question, for several reasons. A, we've already established you don't wash your shit after camping. And B, you know something is up with your friend missing from the campsite, and you claim to be concerned and that you called her family at some point expressing this, which, again, her family denies you ever doing. So I feel like common sense would be that if you felt something was wrong, why take evidence and wash it? What the fuck are you doing? Anyway, so along with collecting the evidence Jordy took from the scene, they bring her in for questioning, along with all the party members from Friday night and even the members from the party on Saturday night. All of which are questioned, and most of which are given polygraph tests. Police state that all the partygoers who took the polygraph test passed, and that because of this, they essentially were cleared as suspects. Jordy claims she took multiple polygraphs and, quote, aced them. I don't know how true that is, being that it was from her and not the police, but regardless, polygraphs are not evidence that is admissible in court, even in Canada. They are usually used as a way to help police get an idea if they're headed in the right direction or not, but I repeat, they do not rule out suspects by any means. So the fact that they relied so heavily on these results as fuel to cross people off of their list feels like a huge misstep to me. People can fail polygraphs and be innocent just as much as they can pass them and be guilty. There is a reason why they are not valid evidence in a court of law. This really fucking irked me when I found this out. So with the results of the polygraphs ruling out a majority of the people there on Friday and Saturday, they narrowed in on a handful of people that they felt were most likely candidates. That included Jordy, her boyfriend Tyler, the unnamed boy who Maddie was rejected by, and the unnamed boy Maddie rejected. They also included the late night caller that nobody knows the name of. There's very little info on how they conducted investigating these people other than that they were detained, questioned, and subsequently released or cleared. I found no mention of any questioning done to Garrett, the birthday boy. I gravitate to him for several reasons. The main one being that there just wasn't any mention that I could find on details as to questioning or investigating him. It was his party, which means he had to know at least the majority of the attendees in some way, shape, or form. He was stated as one of the last 5 people on the scene between 1:40 a.m. and 3 a.m. when she was last heard from or seen. He had plans to camp there that night, but according to reports, changed these plans after a fight with his girlfriend, which led him to pull his tent around 2 a.m. I think one account stated that he offered Maddy a ride and then supposedly left, only to return again the next day at 10 a.m.